I ain't scared of nothing. That's what I yelled to my brother as I slammed the door to my car shut. Things have, changed since then. I've changed. I remember his smirk, how he held out my jacket, the way he spouted off an endless list of things I should be scared of. Skinwalkers and witches and werewolves. Oh my. He presented each one as reason after reason of why this idea was stupid, saying I still had time to flake out, save face. I remember rolling my eyes, snatching my jacket from his grasp, sliding into my car and yelling that I'm not scared before speeding away towards the darkening outline of the mountains. They stood out stark against the setting sun like teeth. Boy, how I wish I listened. I was wrong. He was right. I'm fucking scared. Let me back up a little bit. It all started about 2 days ago. I was out of my mind depressed. Could barely get out of bed. Thought about chucking myself in front of cars, over bridges, off buildings, just dying. I thought about dying all the time. And enough was enough. One of the few friends I had suggested that I try solo camping, said it might clear my mind, that the wilderness, the silence, the solitude would do me good. He gave me a list of spots, some more isolated than the others. I decided on the most isolated one, which was about a 3-hour hike from the last campsite far out in the Rocky Mountain National Forest. I remember his face, the surprise, the acceptance. You sure? His voice cracked. I nodded, saying nothing. Okay, I mean, it's a pretty secluded place, especially for a first-time camper. He shrugged. But then again, it's a beautiful spot. It'll definitely give you some perspective. And the night sky out there is insane. I thanked him and turned to leave, but he spoke up again. Hey, don't let the forest spook you, okay? A word of advice from a veteran. Don't go out at night no matter what you hear. You might get totally fucked by a bear or lion. The drive up the mountains was strangely soothing. The gently curving roads that wove their way through the trees and up the rocks were exciting to navigate, and soon my mind was eased into a peaceful contemplation. I had decided to forego electronics this trip, even going as far as securing my phone in my glove box. I wanted to be completely free of all that shit, able to focus on the now rather than ruminate about the past or fear the future. I would be gone for 5 days and 4 nights, enough time for me to, hopefully, recuperate and reassess my life and what I was doing with it. I soon descended into Estes Park and drove through the picturesque town towards RMNP, willing myself not to stay at the Stanley instead. I found the entrance to the park with ease and continued to the closest lot to my campsite. Night was now falling, and I silently cursed myself for leaving so late. I sat in my car for a good 30 minutes before deciding that it would be too risky hiking 3 hours in near pitch black. There were 4 other tents set up in the lot. I was with room for one more, and soon I had my own tent set up. That night passed comfortably. I was surrounded by chatting, laughing people and unruly but happy children who ran round and round screaming. A few of them offered me roasted hot dogs and s'mores and beers, and I filled my belly, smiling. I was rolled up in my sleeping bag before the last light from the dying embers faded away. The second night didn't go so smoothly. I woke up late, well-rested but still groggy, and took my time repacking my tent. I hesitated at first, wondering if I should just stay there. But at 3 p.m., another family showed up with proof they had reserved the site. So, I gathered my things and set off. And immediately got lost. Navigating by map and compass for the first time, and alone, is a lot harder than it sounds. And the trees. The trees can be misleading, can turn you around, make you think you're on the right path when really you're miles from where you're supposed to be. Instead of taking me 3 hours to get to the site, it took me nearly twice that time, and I was swiftly losing what little light was left in the day. Finally I found the site. But before I breathed a sigh of relief, I haphazardly set up my tent, building a small fire in front. It was dark now, and I was jumpy. Every sound I heard was seemingly magnified, every shadow cast by the dim light of the fire, a menace. Spooked, I crawled into the tent and curled up in my bag, trying to force myself to sleep. After a while, I was dozing, about to drift off, when I heard it. The unmistakable sound of a foot crunching outside. My eyes shot open and I reached for my flashlight but didn't turn it on. I waited. I heard the sound again. Someone, or something, was definitely walking around my tent. It sounded like whatever they was trying to be quiet, stealthy. That went on for hours in inconsistent bursts, until I finally decided it was an animal, scavenging for the scraps or inspecting my tent. By dawn, I was dozing again and the noise had finally stopped. I told myself I would sleep for an hour or two, giving myself time to rest up. I woke up disoriented, exhausted, and started to panic before remembering I was out camping and that I needed to start hiking back. Now. But when I exited the tent, I saw that the sun was already setting. To say I was upset would be an understatement. I hesitated for a moment, trying to decide what to do. I wanted to go home. I wanted to leave, see how far I could get out there. But deep down, I knew I'd instantly get lost and probably end up in a worse situation. So I began collecting as much wood as I could to build a big-ass fire and prepared to hunker down for the night. The light from the sun seemed to disappear unfathomably fast. The third night was, pretty problematic. I sat awake in my tent for hours after the sun went down, waiting. I'd left the fire going for as long as the wood lasted. I know this isn't kosher for camping, but I was improvising and I was absolutely terrified. The darkness around me seemed to crush the light from the fire, making it seem small, pathetic, a tiny candle in a sea of shadows. For hours I sat there, listening, afraid. Finally, I realized I was just being ridiculous, that what I had heard the night before was nothing to fear, that my subconscious, my monkey mind, was just playing tricks on me, keeping me alert for no reason. So I bundled myself up and laid down, and I heard it, softly at first. A footstep, then 2, 3, growing louder, bolder. I sat up and felt my eyes increase to the size of saucers, and my breath quickened. What was that? I had to know. I wasn't thinking. I wasn't. I was operating purely off of fear. I heard the noise. It sounded like something running and running around and around my tent. Suddenly, the side of my tent pushed in as if someone was slapping it from the outside. "Hey!" I yelled, scared out of my wits. "Hey! I'm awake! I'm in here!" I tried to stand, tripping myself up in my sleeping bag in the process, and slammed into the front of the tent. Scrambling up, I swiftly unzipped the flap and ran outside with a red-tinted flashlight. I saw a shape scurry away and followed. And there, standing at the edge of the firelight, barely visible, was the silhouette of a person. They were standing with their back towards me. Their arms were hanging in strange positions by their sides. Their head pointed straight away from me. I took a step towards them, and a branch cracked underneath me. The sound seemed to startle the person, and they turned their head ever so slightly. "Hey," I said again. "What the fuck, man?" And it boiled up, a sound that crescendoed into a scream. It was laughter, and it echoed around me, rattling around in my skull. I ran, leaping into my tent, zipping it up behind me, curling into my sleeping bag, crying. And the world around me exploded, or rather imploded. The walls of the tent shook, like hundreds of hands were slapping it, poking it, punching it. Outside, what sounded like dozens of people running around shattered the silence. I don't know how or when I fell asleep. I think I fainted. Either way, I woke up the next day to a reddish glow encompassing my surroundings. I sat up and ran outside, looking around for proof of what I had heard. But there was nothing. No footprints, handprints, or any disturbance at all. "Fuck this," I muttered to myself, throwing my things chaotically into my bag. I would leave today, in the dark. I couldn't stay another night here. I was just starting to unpole the tent when I heard it. A sound in the distance, perhaps carried to me by the wind which was picking up around me. "Help me! Help me! Please! Oh God, help me!" I reacted more out of instinct than logic, and began running towards the sound before realizing that I, in no way, was in a place to help whoever was screaming. Still, I tried to locate the source of the sound, following the voice for about 30 minutes. "Where are you?" I yelled, looking around me through the maze of trees. "I'm here. Where are you?" Quickly the screams descended into a deep, unsettling laughter. Scared out of my mind, I turned and ran back the way I came. By some miracle, I made it back to my site, grabbed my pack, and uprooted the poles of the tent, thinking that I would just roll it up and carry it back, instead of taking the time to fold it neatly and shove it into its bag. Around me, the mountains loomed up like fangs, like I was about to be swallowed whole by a monstrous mouth. As I pulled each pole, the tent fell a little. But it was only on the third pole out of 6 that I realized it wasn't falling fully flat. Confused, I peered into the tent and reeled in horror, too afraid to even scream. There was someone sitting inside, but not just anyone. It was me. Sitting there, pallor and bone thin, a too wide grin plastered on my face. A single droplet of blood rolled down from each eye, which instead of having green irises, were totally, wholly black. I jumped back, tripping over my own feet. Laughter rose up around me, and as I scrambled up, I saw my hand that was not my hand reach out from the tent, followed swiftly by the other, then the head. My face that was not my face looked up at me, still smiling, then laughed again. I screamed, I stood, I ran, and I ran. I didn't even know if I was running the right way. I couldn't even use the sun anymore for guidance, since it had almost fully set. I ran without looking where I was going. I kept looking behind me to see if that thing was following me. I could feel the trees scratching me up, pushing against me, like they were trying to hold me back, hold me still, until that thing came for me. Suddenly a light flashed in my face, and I ran into something solid, something black, something that wrapped around me. I instantly cowered, hiding my face in my hands. Shit. Oh, please God, no, 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 no. I heard my own voice, terrified, shaking. Hey, calm down. It's okay. You just scared me. Calm down. What's wrong? I looked up and into the worried gray eyes of a human face. The face of a middle-aged man, to be exact. He was holding me up. The flashlight he was using lay fallen at our feet, creating strange shadows behind us. I looked back, fearful of what I might see, but there was nothing. Only trees, swinging slowly in the slight breeze. "Hey," he said again. "Was that you? Screaming? I came out here to check." I couldn't speak. I was too terrified. I shook my head. "Were you camping out there alone?" he asked, letting me go and bending down to retrieve the flashlight. I nodded, then began crying. "Hey, it's okay. It can be spooky out here. Come on, my car is right over there." He gestured with his head back behind him. I and blinked, finally finding my voice. Who are you?" He glanced at me, then away. "I'm, a park ranger." But he didn't look like one. He was wearing a smooth black suit, black tie and white shirt, and his shoes were polished leather, not hiking boots. "Come on," he said again, taking my pack and swinging it onto his back. As he did so, his jacket flapped slightly and I saw what looked like a Sig Sauer handgun strapped to his belt. "Okay," I said, looking back behind me again. "How did you find me?" He shrugged. "Good hearing." We entered a small clearing and I saw a matte black SUV with tinted windows, headlights flaring, engine idling, parked in the middle of it. He popped the trunk and threw my bag in as I climbed into the passenger side seat. He climbed in the driver's seat and asked me where he should take me. I told him the lot number and we were on our way. After a few moments, he flipped the cubby between us open and pulled out a bag. "Corn nuts?" he asked, holding out the bag to me. I took it gratefully and began chomping away. I licked my fingers, then looked back at him. "So, are you really a ranger?" He looked at me, then back to the road, but still I stared at him, transfixed. He looked exhausted, his wood-colored hair disheveled and dirty from the forest. The SUV jerked to a sudden stop, and the man let out a slow, low breath. His eyes narrowed and he looked over at me, then back to the dirt trail in front of us. I followed his gaze, feeling the fear churning up inside me. And there, in the middle of the road, was me. That was me, but that me was not me. Its limbs hung limply, as if they were broken, and that sickly smile was still plastered across the face. It waved. The man looked back at me, then back at the thing that was not me, then back at me. I met his gaze. "I don't get paid enough for this shit," the man muttered before slamming his foot on the accelerator straight towards the thing. We both felt the impact. The car bounced over the body and the man kept driving. But around us, in between the trees, stirred into the darkness. Laughter boiled up, manic and persistent. We reached the lot in silence, bathed in the first light of the rising sun. The man beside me seemed to be deep in thought, distracted. I was still scared, but hopeful that whatever that thing was, it was now dead, crushed by the car, or at least so badly wounded that it would soon succumb. The SUV slowed to a stop and the man popped the trunk and hopped out. He walked to the back and grabbed my pack as I jumped out. He handed it to me and I took it, then thanked him for everything. "No problem," he said, "all in a day's or night's work." His lips quivered as if he was about to smile. I turned to leave, but he spoke up again. "Hey." I turned to face him again. "If you ever want to talk about what you, saw, or, just talk, call me." He held out a card. I took it and looked down at it. It was matte black and only had a single number written on it. There was no area code. I began, but I heard a door slam and looked up. The man was already back in his car. He waved at me, then sped off back the way we had come, back towards that thing. I shoved the card in my pocket, climbed into my car, and left, breathing a sigh of relief. I still haven't told anyone about what happened, even when they asked why I refused to go camping ever again. I just shrug and tell them it wasn't my thing, that I prefer a warm bed and the bustling sounds of a busy city. Every so often, though, I'll pull out the card, my fingers lingering over my phone, wondering if I should call, wondering who the man really was and if he would really be able to explain what happened to me.